So, picture this. You are in the clinic,
Oh, yeah.
right? A client is just screaming at the top of their lungs. They're throwing materials, completely dysregulated.
We have all been there.
Exactly. And, I mean, you are overwhelmed by the noise. You hand them an iPad, and they quiet down instantly.
I like magic.
Right. You breathe this massive sigh of relief, and you think, ugh, okay, I just managed that behavior. But in reality, you just fell into a trap.
Huge trap.
Yeah, a trap that is going to absolutely ruin your clinical progress, stall your client's development, and honestly, tank your exam score.
Oh, 100%.
So, do you still think negative reinforcement is like the same thing as punishment? Because if so, you are leaving critical points on the table.
You really are.
Welcome to this deep dive for behavioral intelligence. Today, we are locking in on BACB 6th edition task list item G.1, which is designing and evaluating positive and negative reinforcement procedures.
A critical topic.
It is. And we are pulling our clinical data and our exam logic directly from the Cooper text, the ethics code for behavior analysts, and some of the most rigorous mark exam questions available.
The really tough ones.
Yeah, the ones that make you sweat. Our mission today is straightforward but really critical. We want to transform you into a top 1% BCBA.
That's the goal.
Right. We're going to master the clinical precision and, the Pearson VUE exam logic required to flawlessly distinguish between reinforcement and punishment, and more importantly, how to actually apply them effectively in applied settings.
Yeah, because, this really is the bedrock of behavior analysis.
It really is.
If you don't have, absolute unquestionable fluency with these specific concepts, your intervention plans are going to drift. Your clients will plateau.
Yep.
And your exam score will undoubtedly reflect that lack of precision. So we have to start by defining reinforcement with strict clinical accuracy.
Right, like exactly as Cooper, Heron, and Heward lay it out in the text.
Exactly. Reinforcement is a consequence that increases or maintains the future frequency of a behavior under similar conditions.
Okay, wait, let's pause there. Increases or maintains?
Yes. Notice what I didn't say. I didn't say it's a reward.
Right.
I didn't say it's something the client likes. That is the only metric that matters, the data.
So we literally do not care about the clinician's intent.
Not at all.
Mm.
We care entirely about the empirical outcome. Did the behavior's future frequency go up, or did it maintain?
Okay.
If the answer is yes, you are looking at reinforcement. Full stop.
Okay, let's unpack this a little bit, because my brain, and, I know the brains of so many listeners out there, we automatically associate the word reinforcement with a gold star.
Oh, absolutely.
Or like a high five or a piece of candy. And from there, we split into positive and negative.
Right.
Now, positive reinforcement seems easy enough to grasp, I think. It's the addition or presentation of a stimulus immediately following a response that increases the future frequency of that behavior.
Exactly. It's an addition equation.
Right. You do a task, you get praise, you do the task more often, +1. But then we get to negative reinforcement, which the texts define as the removal, termination, or avoidance of an aversive stimulus following a response.
And that also increases the future frequency of the behavior.
Right. But wait, I need to push back on this terminology for a second, because a lot of people hear the word negative and they immediately think bad.
Oh, constant.
Or they assume it means punishment. It's like this huge linguistic hurdle. But mathematically speaking, in our field, it just means subtraction. Right.
Precisely. You have to strip all of the emotion out of the terminology.
Yeah.
Positive means plus, negative means minus.
Okay.
It has absolutely nothing to do with whether the client enjoyed the outcome or whether the behavior itself is socially acceptable.
That's a great point.
Yeah, if we connect this to the bigger picture, it is simply about the mechanical operation of the environment. Let's look at a really specific example from the source material to clarify this mechanism.
Yeah, lay it on me.
So imagine it is pouring rain. And the rain is completely blocking your line of sight through your car windshield.
Very aversive.
Highly aversive situation. So what do? You turn on the windshield wipers.
Right.
The wipers immediately remove the rain. The rain was the aversive stimulus.
Okay, I track.
Because your behavior of turning on the wipers successfully removed that aversive stimulus, your behavior of turning on the wipers increases in the future whenever it rains, and your vision is obscured.
Oh, wow. Okay, so what's fascinating here is that the negative part is a relief. It's not a penalty.
Exactly. The subtraction of the rain is the negative reinforcement.
So it's about escaping or avoiding something you just don't want.
You got it.
Like, you have a headache, you take an aspirin, the headache goes away. Taking aspirin is negatively reinforced because the painful stimulus was subtracted.
That's a perfect example.
I get that. But hold on, if I'm staring at a data sheet and the target behavior dropped, but I used a negative consequence, like a subtraction, my brain is screaming to call it negative reinforcement.
I know, it's so common.
Why is that so hard to unlearn?
Well, because society has trained us to view consequences through a moral lens rather than a mathematical one.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But we have to establish the absolute golden rule here. This is the non-negotiable distinction straight from the clinical texts.
Write this down, everybody.
Negative reinforcement increases behavior. Punishment decreases behavior.
Wow. Simple as that.
Simple as that. If the future frequency of the behavior goes up, you cannot, under any circumstances, call it punishment.
Right.
That is the line in the sand. If you cross that line on the Pearson VUE exam, you lose the point.
And if you cross it in the clinic?
You write a fundamentally flawed behavior intervention plan that will likely exacerbate the problem.
Okay, so how does this actually look in the real world, like in the clinic or the school setting? Let's move from the conceptual textbook definitions to the applied clinical practice. I want to look at how we utilize both positive and negative reinforcement intentionally. Specifically, comparing attention-maintained scenarios with escape-maintained scenarios because they require completely different architectural approaches.
They absolutely do.
Yeah.
Let's break down the attention-maintained scenario first.
Okay.
We see this in the mock exams frequently, and it's a classic positive reinforcement loop. A basketball player makes a free throw, and immediately his teammates run up, give him high fives, and shout verbal praise.
Nice.
So the social approval, the attention is added to the environment immediately following the target behavior of making the free throw.
Okay, so because this is a clear addition, and because we see the player's focus and likelihood of making future free throws increase, we are looking at positive reinforcement.
Exactly. The behavior was maintained by gaining access to something in the environment.
Right, the clinical application there is fairly intuitive. We add preferred stimuli to build a skill. But let's look at the escape-maintained scenario.
Oh, this is the good stuff.
Yeah, because this is where a top-tier clinician really separates themselves from an average one. The sources give us a great functional communication training, or FCT, scenario.
The Elijah case.
Yes, Elijah. So we have a client named Elijah. When Elijah's parents correct his behavior or place a demand on him, say, telling him it's time to do his homework, he immediately exhibits verbal aggression and argues.
And the functional analysis clearly shows this behavior is escape-maintained.
Right. He argues specifically to get out of the task.
And this is exactly where we must leverage negative reinforcement clinically to engineer a solution.
How so?
Well, look at the baseline contingency. Demand is presented, Elijah argues, the parents feel emotional friction and back off, and the demand is removed.
Ah, so Elijah's arguing is being negatively reinforced. It works for him.
It works perfectly. To change this, we don't just punish the arguing. We implement a differential reinforcement of alternative behavior, a DRA procedure.
Okay, a DRA.
Right. We teach Elijah a functionally equivalent replacement skill. We teach him to calmly request a 5-minute break using a communication card. Or, his vocal repertoire.
And this requires a massive neurological shift for the client, doesn't it? Like, we are changing the rules of the game.
Exactly. Now, the new contingency is introduced. The demand is presented, Elijah asks for a break, and the demand is immediately removed.
We subtracted the aversive stimulus.
Yes, but this time it was contingent on appropriate communication. Elijah's appropriate requesting behavior increases because it is negatively reinforced.
That's brilliant.
But, and this is a big but, we also have to prepare the parents for the extinction burst.
Oh, yeah. It's going to get worse before it gets better.
Right. When they stop removing the demand following the arguing, Elijah will likely argue louder and harder at first.
Because his old trick isn't working.
Exactly. The parents have to hold the line so that the maladaptive behavior no longer accesses the negative reinforcement.
Meanwhile, the new low-effort communication skill accesses it instantly.
You got it.
Man, what I love about that DRA procedure is the dual purpose. Like, reinforcement isn't just for building brand new skills in a vacuum. We're actively using it for behavior reduction.
It's powerful.
Right. We are increasing that functionally equivalent replacement skill, asking for the break, while simultaneously placing the problem behavior, the verbal aggression, on extinction.
Precisely.
If he argues, the demand stays. If he asks appropriately, the demand is removed. We are capturing the exact same motivating operation, his desire to escape, but we're shifting the response class that successfully accesses the reinforcer.
That is the very essence of clinical precision right there. You are manipulating the environment so that the maladaptive behavior is no longer efficient, but the adaptive behavior pays off immediately.
You're making the right choice, the easy choice.
Exactly. But this transition from theory to practice is fraught with danger.
Yes. Here's where it gets really interesting, because this is exactly where clinicians and test takers mess up.
They fall right into the traps.
It's one thing to hear the theory, but the application is full of traps. Let's walk through the common mistakes. The traps that will not only tank your exam score, but fundamentally ruin your clinical outcomes.
Let's do it.
Trap number 1, confusing negative reinforcement with punishment. And honestly, this is the one I struggle with the most when I'm moving quickly.
This is the most common error we see in supervision by far. Let's say a clinician implements a response cost procedure within a token economy.
Okay.
The client elopes from the work area, and the clinician immediately takes away one of their earned tokens.
Right.
The clinician then goes to their session notes and documents that they used negative reinforcement because they took something away to address the behavior.
Oh, no.
That is entirely incorrect. You removed a preferred item, the token, which is a conditioned reinforcer, specifically to decrease the future frequency of the elopement.
Oh, I see it.
Taking something away to decrease a behavior is negative punishment. It is not negative reinforcement.
See, that's exactly the mental block. Because I subtracted something, my brain says negative. And because I'm trying to fix a behavior, I assume it's an intervention, which I loosely associate with reinforcement.
Right, it's a semantic trap.
But it's the direction of the behavior that dictates the second half of the term. If you take a token away and the elopement stops or decreases, you punish the behavior. You didn't reinforce it.
Precisely. Negative reinforcement must increase behavior. Always.
Always.
Now, this logical failure leads directly into trap number 2, misidentifying the function.
Oh. Let's pull a scenario straight from the sources for this one.
Go for it.
So we have a student, Gary, who goes around the classroom tickling his peers during independent reading time.
Classic Gary.
Right. And why? Because the functional assessment shows it reliably gets their attention and they laugh.
Yep.
So if a well-meaning teacher tries to intervene by punishing Gary, let's say she sends him to the principal's office every single time he tickles someone, why does the tickling persist week after week?
Because she completely ignored the why.
Yes. She just saw behavior she didn't like and threw a consequence at it.
Exactly. The intervention completely missed the function. If Gary's behavior is maintained by peer attention, sending him to the principal's office is a fundamentally flawed strategy for 2 big reasons.
Lay him out.
First, sitting in the office might actually be providing a different, perhaps more highly preferred type of adult attention.
Oh, true. He might love talking to the principal.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Second, and more importantly, it completely fails to teach an alternative behavior to access the peer attention he is so clearly seeking.
You can't just apply a blanket punishment and expect long-term behavioral success.
You really can't. You must match the reinforcement to the function. If Gary wants attention, you have to teach him a socially appropriate way to gain that attention.
Like telling a joke or asking to play a game.
Right, and then you reinforce that specific alternative behavior. If you don't replace the function, you leave a behavioral vacuum.
And nature abhors a vacuum.
Right. Exactly. The problem behavior will either persist or you will see behavioral contrast occur, where the tickling spikes intensely in a different setting, like on the playground where the teacher isn't present.
Okay, so if misidentifying the function ruins the intervention for the client, what happens when the intervention accidentally reinforces the clinician?
Oh boy.
Yeah, that leads us directly to trap number 3, and this is a massive one. The negative reinforcement trap for clinicians.
It's so insidious.
We see this extensively detailed in the ethics and supervision sources. Let's go back to that scenario I mentioned right at the start of our talk today.
The screaming client.
Yes. A client is screaming at the top of their lungs in the clinic. A staff member, completely overwhelmed by the sensory input and the stress of the noise, hands the client an iPad just to quiet them down.
Just to survive the moment.
Right. And the client instantly stops screaming and starts playing a game. What just happened to the behavioral contingencies in that room?
This is a textbook, highly dangerous cycle that destroys clinical progress. Let's analyze the behavior of both individuals in that room.
Okay.
First, look at the client. They screamed, and an iPad, a highly preferred stimulus, was added to their environment.
So positive reinforcement.
Yes, the client's screaming was just positively reinforced on a continuous schedule, but look at the staff member.
Okay, the staff member handed over the iPad, and the highly aversive screaming was immediately terminated.
Exactly. The staff member's behavior of giving in was negatively reinforced.
Wow. So the next time that client screams, that staff member is going to hand over that iPad even faster because the relief they felt was just so potent.
Exactly. The staff member is being actively conditioned by the client to reinforce maladaptive behavior. And why? Because the staff member's own escape behavior is being negatively reinforced.
This is exactly how procedural drift happens, isn't it?
Yes. This is how beautifully written behavior plans just fall apart in the real world.
So what's the fix?
Well, as a supervising BCBA, if you do not recognize that your registered behavior technicians are caught in a negative reinforcement trap, you are failing your client and your staff.
You have to train your staff to tolerate the aversive stimulus of the screaming.
Exactly. They have to tolerate it so they don't fall victim to their own contingencies.
Okay, this is blowing my mind a little bit because it requires you to be hyper aware of the environment from multiple perspectives simultaneously.
It does. It's multi-layered.
But let's distill all of this down for the people taking the test. I want to give you a foolproof strategy for the Pearson VUE exam.
Okay, let's pivot to exam strategy.
Right, because when you are sitting at that testing center computer staring at a massive convoluted paragraph about Gary or Elijah, how do you decode the Pearson VUE logic? Because those test writers are actively trying to trick you.
Oh,
Right?
yes, they absolutely are.
Yeah.
Pearson VUE intentionally buries the outcome of the behavior at the very end of a massive paragraph.
Just to exhaust your working memory.
Exactly. They want you to get emotionally attached to the aversive stimulus described in, like, sentence 2, so you completely forget to check the actual data presented in sentence 5.
Sneaky.
Very. To beat this, you need to use a rigid two-step matrix. Do not read the scenario and guess based on how it feels or how much you sympathize with the client.
Okay, what's step 1?
Step 1. Look exclusively at the future frequency of the target behavior. Skip straight to the end of the prompt. Did the behavior go up or did it go down?
And if it went up?
If the prompt says the behavior increased or even just maintained over time, instantly cross out any answer choice that contains the word punishment. It must be reinforcement.
Boom. Options immediately cut in half.
Right. Now, step 2. Look at the consequence. Was a stimulus added or presented to the environment, or was an aversive stimulus removed, terminated, or avoided?
So the absolute rule of thumb is if you see the words behavior increased and you see that an aversive demand was removed, you do not hesitate. You don't second guess it. You choose negative reinforcement.
Without question. Trust the matrix, not your intuition.
I love that. Trust the matrix.
And let me add a bonus exam tip derived directly from the sources regarding schedules of reinforcement. Because Pearson VUE loves to test this concept alongside reinforcement types to see if you can synthesize the information.
Late on us.
If the prompt states that you are establishing a new behavior or teaching a skill for the very first time, your answer must be continuous reinforcement.
Which is an FR1, right?
Yes, a fixed ratio 1 schedule. This means every single correct response gets a payoff. The reinforcement is guaranteed.
Okay, got it.
But if the prompt asks how to maintain that behavior over time or how to make it resistant to extinction once the skill is acquired, you must choose an answer that involves thinning the schedule.
Thinning it out to a variable or intermittent schedule.
Precisely.
That is such a high-level test strategy. Use a fixed ratio 1, continuous schedule to build the skill, and then thin it out to variable schedules to maintain it so the client doesn't become reliant on constant reinforcement.
You've got it.
So what does this all mean for our listeners who are out there writing behavior plans tomorrow morning? Let's talk about the clinical power insight here. How do we elevate our practice beyond just memorizing matrices and passing the test?
Well, it all connects back to the ethics code for behavior analysts, specifically section 2.14.
Okay.
This code mandates that behavior analysts prioritize positive reinforcement procedures. This is not a suggestion. It is not merely a best practice guideline. It is a strict ethical obligation.
Wow, okay.
We must design interventions that prioritize positive reinforcement before we ever consider punishment or highly restrictive negative reinforcement procedures.
And what is the actual mechanism, like the why behind that ethics code? Why is the BACB so strict about prioritizing positive reinforcement? Is it just about optics, or is there a functional reason?
Oh, it is entirely functional. Punishment really tells a learner what not to do. If
Right.
you use an analogy, punishment is like putting a bucket under a leaky roof. You manage the mess for today, but the hole is still there.
You haven't actually fixed the structural problem.
Exactly. And eventually that bucket will overflow. Furthermore, punishment often elicits severe emotional side effects, aggression, or that behavioral contrast we discussed earlier.
It suppresses behavior temporarily, but leaves a behavioral vacuum.
Yes. Reinforcement, on the other hand, is actually patching the roof so you never need the bucket again.
I love that analogy.
It builds what we call the behavioral cusp. It teaches functional adaptive skills that open up the client's world to natural contingencies of reinforcement.
That makes so much sense. We aren't just trying to stop a behavior, we are trying to engineer a better environment.
Exactly.
A top 1% BCBA doesn't just look at a case and say, how do I stop this kid from arguing? They look at the case and say, how do I seamlessly weave positive and negative reinforcement together to build a socially valid repertoire that makes this problem behavior completely irrelevant?
Exactly. The true benchmark of elite clinical practice is rendering the maladaptive behavior entirely inefficient and ineffective.
Because the adaptive skills you've systematically reinforced are just so much easier to use.
And so much more rewarding for the client. That is how you change a life. You don't just eliminate a deficit, you build a repertoire.
If this helped you, follow behavioral intelligence, share this episode with another RBT or BCBA who's studying, and leave a comment or review. That's how we grow and how I keep creating high-level content for you.
At Amethyst Therapy Services, Inc., we build clinicians, not just test passers. Visit us at www.amethysttherapyservices.com or email us at info@amethysttherapyservices.com.
Think about this before you go back to the clinic. Our entire society is built almost strictly on rules enforced by negative punishment and negative reinforcement.
It really is.
We pay our taxes to avoid jail, we drive the speed limit to avoid fines, we go to work to avoid losing our homes.
Avoidance.
Right. So what would a society or even just your own clinic look like if it were engineered strictly around positive reinforcement? If the contingencies were based on what we gain rather than what we are terrified of losing? Evaluate your own daily contingencies, and we'll see you in the next deep dive.